From the outside, the Reed family looked like any other struggling household in rural Alabama. But inside, 10-year-old Hannah Reed lived a reality that felt anything but normal. She was the third of 5 children in a crumbling wooden house just off a dusty 2-lane road outside Huntsville. Her older sister, Megan, just 16, was already working full-time to support the family, while their youngest sibling, little Lucy, was the family's darling, always dancing, singing, and sitting on their mother's lap. Hannah, meanwhile, was the invisible middle child, doing dishes barefoot and walking 2 miles to school on an empty stomach. Their father, Roger, once a mechanic at a local shop, had started disappearing more often, returning home only to yell or crash on the old sofa reeking of beer and someone else's perfume. Then one day, he simply didn't come back. The child support stopped, and their mother, Carol, began unraveling under the weight of unpaid bills, 5 hungry mouths, and a shattered heart. Hannah watched her mother fall apart in real time, sometimes muttering to herself at the kitchen table, other times yanking at her own hair while screaming about electric bills. What hurt most wasn't the chaos, but that Hannah felt like she wasn't even part of the equation. She wasn't the achiever like Megan. She wasn't the baby like Lucy. She was just there. Then one Saturday morning in early spring, everything changed. A man showed up in a truck that looked too polished for their dusty yard. His name was Caleb Morgan, 36, tall, clean-shaven, and with a kind of calm that didn't belong in their world. He was Hannah's godfather, someone she barely remembered from a baptism photo buried deep in a drawer. Caleb had just returned from 8 years of working overseas in construction and now ran a building supply business in Birmingham. He came bearing groceries, kind words, and then an offer. "I've got space in my home, Carol," Caleb told her mother, while Hannah stood in the hallway pretending not to listen. "Let me take Hannah. I can send her to a good school, give her a fresh start." Hannah's heart leapt. No one had ever spoken of her like that, like she was worth something. But then came the moment that would haunt her for years. Her mother asked, "How much can you help with financially?" The question hung in the air like a foul smell. There was no tearful goodbye, no "I love you," just a scribbled letter of guardianship, a bag of clothes, and her mother's voice saying, "This is better for everyone, especially you." As Caleb buckled her into his truck and drove off, Hannah stared out the window, her hands gripping the seatbelt like it might fly apart. It wasn't excitement she felt. It was grief disguised as hope. "You okay back there?" Caleb asked, his voice soft over the hum of the engine. She didn't answer. Because how do you explain the ache of being left behind by the people who were supposed to fight for you? They arrived in Birmingham that afternoon. Caleb's home sat at the edge of a quiet cul-de-sac. It had 2 stories, a wraparound porch, and the smell of fresh paint. Compared to where she'd come from, it looked like something out of a movie. The house was quiet, but not cold. There was a warmth in the way he showed her the guest room and told her, "You'll be safe here." Still, as night fell, Hannah lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning above her. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring. But she did know one thing. This was the first time in her life she wasn't surrounded by chaos. And yet, deep down, the sting remained. What kind of mother lets go that easily? Hannah Reed had been living with Caleb Morgan for 6 months, but it felt like she had stepped into an entirely different lifetime. Gone were the nights of sleeping on a torn mattress beside crying siblings, and the constant fear of bills being thrown on the kitchen table. Here, in Caleb's quiet Birmingham home, she woke up to the smell of brewed coffee, warm eggs on a plate, and the hum of a dishwasher. Not shouting, not silence, but peace. At first, she kept waiting for the calm to crack. She was polite, careful. She folded her clothes too tightly, triple-checked her homework, and didn't ask for seconds at dinner, even when her stomach still rumbled. Caleb noticed. "You don't have to tiptoe around here, kiddo," he said one evening, sliding an extra piece of cornbread onto her plate. "This is your home too." The words landed softly but didn't quite sink in. Hannah nodded, but the truth was, she didn't know what home felt like. Still, something in Caleb's voice, gentle but firm, steady, told her she could stop holding her breath. Over time, Hannah started to believe in the safety of routine. She transferred to a nearby all-girls school, where the buildings were lined with ivy and the classrooms had working heaters. She'd never worn a uniform before. The skirt felt too crisp, the blazer too neat. But Caleb smiled as he dropped her off that first day. "You look like you belong there," he said. No one had ever said she belonged anywhere. At school, Hannah struggled at first. Her classmates came from families with money, tradition, vacation homes, and piano lessons. Hannah came from powdered milk, skipped dinners, and hand-me-down shoes. But she was smart, and slowly she found her footing. Caleb made it clear she could always talk to him about anything. And she did, almost. The one thing she never said was how her feelings for Caleb had started to change. It began subtly. The way he remembered her favorite candy bar. How he waited in the car line longer than any other parent without complaint. How he left encouraging sticky notes on her bathroom mirror the week of her exams. "You're going to do great, Hannah. I believe in you." See, her heart fluttered every time. By the time she was 17, Hannah realized the ache she felt around Caleb wasn't just gratitude. It was admiration, and something deeper. She would lie in bed at night wondering what it would feel like to hold his hand without it being paternal. What it would be like if he weren't just her guardian, but something more. She hated herself for those thoughts. He had raised her, cared for her. It felt wrong to imagine anything beyond that. But they weren't related. He wasn't her father. He wasn't even married. Just a man who had stepped in when no one else would. Still, Hannah kept those thoughts locked tightly in the corners of her mind. That summer, everything shifted. One evening after dinner, Caleb noticed her silence. "Tough day?" he asked. She hesitated. "I guess. School's been a lot. College stuff, expectations. I feel like I'm not measuring up to what you've given me." He frowned. "You don't owe me anything. I didn't take you in for payback." "I know," she said, voice softer than a whisper. "That's what makes it harder." He looked at her, truly looked. There was a pause, long enough to hold 100 thoughts. "I'm proud of you," he said, "more than you know." Hannah felt tears threaten. She stood, walked around the table, and hugged him. It wasn't the kind of hug a daughter gave. It lingered. Her arms didn't release first. His breath changed, sharper, deeper. When they finally stepped apart, neither spoke for a few seconds. The room felt too quiet. "You're not a little girl anymore," Caleb said carefully. "I know," she answered, looking him straight in the eyes. "I haven't been for a long time." From that moment on, their relationship became more layered, more cautious. He kept a bit more distance, perhaps sensing the shift. But for Hannah, every word, every shared moment, now carried weight. She wasn't trying to seduce him. She didn't even know what that meant fully. But she loved him, and not as a daughter. That truth scared her more than she could admit. When college acceptance letters started arriving, she sat on the porch with Caleb one night, the crickets humming in the background. "You ever regret it?" she asked, holding the letter from Emery in her hands. "Taking me in?" He looked stunned. "Never. You're the best decision I ever made." The moonlight caught her face as she turned toward him. "I love you," she said quietly. "I love you too." But they both knew their "I love yous" didn't mean the same thing anymore. In the spring of her senior year, just after Hannah Reed turned 18, Caleb Morgan surprised her with an idea. "You've worked hard, got into Emory. Let's get away for a few days, celebrate, clear your head," he said over dinner one Thursday evening. Hannah's heart beat faster, but she masked it with a smile. For months, maybe years, she'd been suppressing how she felt about Caleb. He was her guardian, yes, but more than that, he had become the center of her world. And though she never dared to act on it, the thought of a getaway, just the two of them, stirred something inside her she could no longer deny. They chose Charleston, South Carolina. Caleb booked a small riverfront rental with a second-floor wraparound porch, a place full of charm, wood floors, flowering vines, quiet mornings. It felt worlds away from everything Hannah had known. From the moment they arrived, the energy between them shifted. No longer were they in their usual rhythm, early mornings, work schedules, school drop-offs. Here, it was just them. That first night, after unpacking and a long walk through cobblestone streets, they sat across from each other in a candlelit bistro. Caleb wore a navy sweater Hannah had never seen before. He looked younger, more relaxed. "You've come a long way," he said, lifting his glass. "From that shy girl in oversized sweaters to this confident, bright young woman." "I had a good teacher," Hannah replied, unable to meet his eyes for too long. She noticed how his gaze lingered on her, a little longer than before. The next day, they walked along Sullivan's Island beach. The sky was open, the tide calm. Hannah kicked off her sandals, letting the cold water rush over her feet. Caleb walked beside her, hands in his pockets, quiet as ever. When she slipped on a smooth stone, he caught her by the waist, firm, instinctive, protective. But he didn't let go right away. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. A pause, a breath held too long. Then he stepped back, cleared his throat, and said nothing. That evening, they sat under a sky full of fireworks by the riverfront. Caleb handed her a cup of hot cocoa. When she shivered, he draped his jacket over her shoulders. "Have you ever done something you knew was crossing a line?" she asked quietly, not looking at him. He didn't respond at first. "Lines exist for a reason," he finally said. "But what if both people know what they feel is real?" she pressed. He turned to her then, studying her face. The light from the fireworks flickered in her eyes. "Hannah, you're young." "I'm not a child." A long silence stretched between them. Then she leaned in and kissed his cheek, just briefly. But when she pulled away, he hadn't moved. His eyes were searching hers, and for the first time, he didn't pull away. "I felt this way for a long time," she whispered. "I just didn't know how to say it." Caleb exhaled slowly, as if he'd been holding his breath for years. Back at the rental, neither of them spoke as they stepped inside. But something unspoken had shifted. On the porch, under soft string lights and the scent of salt air, Caleb finally turned to her. This isn't simple, Hannah." "No, it's not. But it's real." Their kiss wasn't rushed or stolen. It was soft, deep. It held every quiet moment they had shared over the years, every tear he had wiped, every morning he had packed her lunch, every night she had prayed for the right time to tell him how she felt. Afterward, they sat together in silence. Hannah rested her head on his shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I've never been more sure of anything." He chuckled softly. "You're braver than I am." Maybe. Or maybe you just forgot what it feels like to be loved. That night, they didn't pretend. They didn't talk themselves out of what had already happened. For once, they let themselves feel. The next morning, when Hannah woke up, she found Caleb on the porch with 2 cups of coffee. He looked at her with a smile, but there was tension behind it. "I don't regret anything," she said before he could speak. "Neither do I, but things are going to get complicated." "They've always been complicated. I'm just not hiding anymore." He handed her a cup and kissed the top of her head. "We'll take it one day at a time." As they drove back to Birmingham that afternoon, the road ahead felt different. There were no more secrets, no more questions. But there were consequences coming, ones they hadn't yet faced. Still, Hannah held Caleb's hand tightly the entire way home. Because in her heart, she knew they had crossed a line, and neither of them wanted to go back. Returning to Birmingham after Charleston, Hannah Reed expected complications, but not silence. Caleb grew quiet. He still made her coffee every morning, still asked about her day, but something had changed. He was more cautious, less present. At first, she thought it was guilt. Later, she realized it was fear. Fear of what people would say, of what they'd think if they knew the truth. Still, their bond held steady. At home, they kept things behind closed doors, but Hannah could see it in the way Caleb looked at her when he thought no one else was watching, the way he reached for her hand in the hallway when Althea, their longtime housekeeper, wasn't around. But hiding had never been Hannah's way. One Saturday morning, Caleb sat at the kitchen table scrolling through his phone, a tension in his jaw she'd seen before. "What is it?" she asked, pouring herself some coffee. He hesitated. "I've been talking to my sister, Karen. She's flying in from Oregon next month." "Oh. She wants to meet you again, and I told her everything." Hannah set down her mug. "You did?" She asked why I sounded different, why I seemed happier. I couldn't lie anymore. "And?" She didn't scream. She didn't hang up. But she's worried. "Because I was your goddaughter?" "Because you raised her red flags, not mine." Hannah swallowed the lump in her throat. She knew this moment would come. And it wasn't just Karen. Caleb took her hand. "We need to talk to your family, too." She froze. "My family hasn't cared about me in years." "I know, but if we're serious, and I am, Hannah, we need to face this head on." So, a week later, they drove 3 hours north to Jasper, Alabama, where Hannah's biological mother and siblings still lived in the same weathered house on Maple Avenue. The sun was low when they pulled up the gravel driveway. Hannah felt her stomach twist as memories of peeling paint, shouting matches, and nights without dinner flooded back. Carol, her mother, stood on the porch in a faded house dress, her arms crossed, eyes narrowing the moment she saw Caleb step out of the car. "What's he doing here?" she snapped before Hannah could speak. Hannah stepped forward. "Mom, can we come in? I need to talk to you." Inside, the house hadn't changed. Same sagging couch, same dusty lamp in the corner. The air smelled of fried grease and unresolved pain. Her younger sister, Lucy, now 13, peeked from the hallway, and Megan, the oldest, walked in holding a toddler on her hip. "What's this about?" Carol asked, sitting down heavily. Hannah stood in the center of the room, Caleb close but silent. "I'm here to tell you that Caleb and we're together, and I'm pregnant." The room exploded. Carol shot up. "What? You're out of your mind! That man raised you like a daughter!" "No," Hannah said firmly. "He protected me when no one else did. He gave me a home, food, love, things I never had here. You were a child. I'm not a child anymore. I'm 30 weeks pregnant. This is happening." Megan's mouth dropped open. "You really love him?" "Yes, and he loves me. We're planning a wedding. I wanted to tell you in person." "You're disgusting," Carol muttered. "That's what this is." "No, Mom. What's disgusting is selling your daughter to a man because you needed grocery money. Don't pretend like you cared." Caleb finally stepped in. "I didn't plan this, but I love Hannah. I never crossed a line when she was underage. I did what I could to raise her right." "You shouldn't have raised her at all," Carol barked. "You should have stayed gone." Silence. Then Lucy whispered, "Are you happy?" Hannah turned. "Yes, I am." "Then I think it's okay," the little girl said, before disappearing into the hallway. Megan sighed. "They'll talk, this town." "I don't care what people say," Hannah replied. I care about my family. I came here because I hoped maybe you could be happy for me." Carol didn't respond. She walked out of the room. Megan came over and hugged Hannah. "It's weird, but I've seen your life. You're safe. You're loved. That's more than most people have." They left without a blessing, without support, but they also left without shame. On the drive home, Caleb gripped the steering wheel tightly. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" "That I couldn't protect you from their words." Hannah placed her hand on his. "You gave me something they never did. The right to be seen, to be heard. That's all I ever wanted." A week later, Karen arrived from Oregon. She sat with them at the kitchen table, quiet, thoughtful. Then she asked Caleb to leave the room for a moment. When it was just the two of them, Karen said softly, "Is this what you want, Hannah?" "Truly?" "Yes. I've never been more sure of anything." She nodded slowly. "Then I'll be at your wedding." When Caleb returned, she hugged him for the first time in 5 years. "Just take care of her," she whispered. He didn't need to promise. It was already etched in the way he looked at Hannah, as if she were his entire world. And for once, she believed that was okay. The wedding wasn't held in a church or a grand venue. Hannah Reed didn't want glitter or hundreds of guests. What she wanted was honesty, a celebration not of tradition, but of survival, of love found in the unlikeliest of places. They stood under the tall oak tree behind Caleb Morgan's house, the same house that had once been a sanctuary for a frightened 12-year-old girl and was now a home built on something deeper. It was a small ceremony. Just Karen, Caleb's sister, a few close friends from his business, and Megan, Hannah's older sister, who had decided to stand beside her as her maid of honor. Hannah wore a simple ivory dress, hand-stitched by Karen herself. Her baby bump pressed gently against the fabric, visible but not hidden. She refused to conceal the truth of where her life had taken her. Caleb looked at her like the world began and ended with her. Gone was the hesitation. Gone was the guilt. He wasn't just claiming a wife that day. He was standing beside the woman who had changed him. And Hannah, for the first time in her life, felt completely chosen. "I, Caleb, promise to honor the woman you've become and the girl you once were. Both brave, both beautiful," he said during his vows. "I, Hannah," she replied, "choose you, not because you rescued me, but because you stayed, because you saw me when no one else did." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Caleb kissed her tenderly, no longer uncertain, no longer hiding, just two people standing in their truth. The months that followed were quiet but full. Caleb continued working his construction supply business, scaling back just enough to be present. Hannah, now in her final trimester, spent her days organizing the nursery and finishing a few remaining online nursing classes she'd deferred. Despite the whispers in town, despite the judgmental glances in grocery aisles and the murmurs at the gas station, she walked taller than ever. People would always talk, but they didn't know her story. She did. They didn't see the nights she went to bed hungry, the years she walked to school in shoes with holes, or the way her mother traded her away like spare change. They didn't see the girl who rose from that, not by luck, but by strength. With every appointment, every baby kick, every lesson finished, Hannah reclaimed her name. Not the girl from Maple Avenue, not someone's former goddaughter, just Hannah. And then came labor. It was a Friday afternoon in late October when her water broke. The contractions started quickly and intensely. Caleb rushed her to the hospital, gripping the steering wheel with one hand and holding hers with the other. Her knuckles turned white. "It's okay," he said, trying to remain calm. "You're strong. You've got this." They'd planned a natural birth, but hours into labor, complications arose. The baby's heartbeat became irregular. The doctor looked tense. Caleb wouldn't leave her side. "She's in distress," the doctor said. "We may need to do an emergency C-section." "No," Hannah whispered, sweat beading down her forehead. "Please, let me try a little longer." "You don't have to prove anything," Caleb whispered, brushing her hair away from her face. "Not to me, not to anyone." But she looked him in the eye. "This is our child. I want to bring her into the world my way." And so, she pushed. 10 hours later, through screams, tears, and strength she didn't know she still had, their daughter arrived. Tiny, pink, wailing, alive. Caleb cried first, then Hannah. They named her Ellie Morgan Reed, a name that honored no one from the past but signaled everything new. In the recovery room, Caleb held Ellie close, whispering to her softly while Hannah drifted in and out of sleep. At one point, she opened her eyes and watched him cradle the baby, singing softly. That image burned into her heart. This was her family now. A week later, she sat in the nursery, walls painted soft sage green, hand-stitched curtains from Karen swaying in the breeze. Ellie lay asleep on her chest. Her phone buzzed. It was Megan. "I told Mom you gave birth," her sister said. She didn't say much, just nodded. Then she said, "Is the baby okay?" Hannah swallowed hard. "Yeah, she's perfect." Megan paused. "She asked what she looked like, if she looked like you." Hannah didn't answer. "I think maybe one day she'll come around," Megan added. "I'm not waiting anymore," Hannah said softly. "This is my life now. I'm not looking back." After the call ended, Hannah walked out to the porch, baby in arms, where Caleb was sipping coffee. "She fell asleep on me," Hannah whispered, smiling. Caleb reached over and kissed both their foreheads. "You're incredible," he said. "Number we are," she replied. And there, on that porch, Hannah Reed finally understood what it meant to own her story. Not to hide from it, not to apologize for it, but to live it fully, without shame, without permission. Because the girl who had once been passed over had now become a woman no one could ignore. 5 years passed. The baby who once lay on Hannah's chest was now a spirited little girl with her father's calm eyes and her mother's quiet fire. Ellie loved to ask questions about everything, from clouds to stars to why her mom didn't have many photos from when she was little. Hannah never told her the full truth, not yet. Life in Birmingham had become steady, even beautiful. Hannah passed her board exams, earned her nursing license, and began working part-time at a women's clinic, helping young mothers who reminded her of herself, alone, overlooked, but still fighting. Caleb supported her every step, balancing his own work with bedtime stories and dance recitals. He never let public whispers dim his love, never treated their past as a shadow. He was her partner in every sense. But despite the peace they had built, something still tugged at her late at night. Her past had never truly knocked, but it hadn't disappeared either. Her brother Jesse had been arrested 2 years earlier for drug possession. Lucy dropped out of high school. Megan now had 3 children of her own, constantly juggling 2 jobs and a marriage on the brink. Her mother, Carol, was still in Jasper, living alone, her health in slow decline. Sometimes Hannah would find herself standing by the mailbox, holding a card she had written but never mailed. Other times, she'd scroll through old photos, wondering if anyone on the other end still thought about her. One Sunday morning, after Ellie had gone to bed and the house was still, Hannah sat with Caleb on the porch swing. "I've been thinking," she said softly. He looked up. "About visiting them." Caleb didn't respond right away. He knew them didn't need a name. "Would that bring you peace?" he finally asked. "I don't know. Maybe it's not about peace. Maybe it's just closure." He reached for her hand. "If you go, I'll go with you. And if you don't, I'll support that too." She smiled gently. "That's the thing, Caleb. I don't need protection anymore. I just want to decide for myself." That night, Hannah didn't sleep much. She thought of the girl she once was, the girl no one fought for, the girl who had been handed off in exchange for grocery money. But that girl had grown into a woman who built her own home, her own family, her own worth. Maybe reconciliation wasn't about forgiveness. Maybe it was just about showing up, not for them, but for herself. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to knock on the door that never truly closed. Hannah Reid's journey teaches us that healing doesn't always begin with forgiveness. It begins with choosing ourselves. She was abandoned, overlooked, and given away by the very people who should have protected her. But instead of letting that define her, Hannah built a life rooted in love, dignity, and quiet strength. Her story reminds us that family is not always bound by blood, but by loyalty, care, and the courage to stay when it's inconvenient. Even in the face of judgment, she stood firm, not to prove her worth, but because she finally knew it. For older viewers, Hannah's story is a call to reflect on the relationships we've let shape our self-worth. It's never too late to reclaim peace, to set boundaries, or to forgive ourselves for what we had to survive. Most of all, it reminds us that redemption isn't always loud. It can be found in small moments: a child's laughter, a hand held in silence, or the bravery to knock on a door we once thought was shut forever.